From ashes to light. From the outside, Aaron's life looked normal enough. A bright kid with untapped potential, he had a spark in his eyes that his teachers said could take him far. But behind that spark was a storm brewing, one that started when he was just a boy. Growing up in a rough neighborhood, Aaron was surrounded by temptation. He didn't have much guidance at home. His mother worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, and his father had disappeared years ago, leaving a hole that nothing seemed to fill. The streets became Aaron's second home, and the friends he made there led him into a world that would change him forever. It started harmlessly. At first, it was just to fit in. A little puff here, a pill there, just to show that he was part of the crew. But soon, the drugs took hold of him, wrapping their claws around his life. What started as experimentation spiraled into addiction before Aaron even realized it. By the time he was a teenager, drugs had become the center of his existence. He began skipping school, his grades plummeted, and the dreams his teachers had once spoken of seemed so distant that they felt like someone else's. Aaron couldn't see it at the time, but the drugs were numbing more than just the pain of his broken home. They were snuffing out the light in his soul. Years passed and Aaron became a man, but he wasn't the man he had imagined himself becoming. Instead of working a steady job or going to college, he was hustling on the streets, doing whatever it took to feed his habit. He had seen friends die, seen others locked away for life, and still he pressed on, too lost to see a way out. Then came the night that changed everything. Aaron was at his lowest point. He had hit rock bottom before, but this was different. His body was aching for a hit, and he had no money left. Desperation gnawed at him, pushing him to do things he swore he never would. He found himself on the streets, begging for enough to score just one more time. His hands shook, his heart raced, and in that moment he felt utterly and completely alone. As he stumbled through the dark, his mind clouded and his body weak, he heard something strange, singing. It was soft at first, almost drowned out by the chaos in his head. But the sound grew louder as he followed it, like a beacon pulling him from the edge of the abyss. He turned the corner and saw the source, a small church, its doors open, light spilling onto the street. The voices inside were singing a song he had never heard before, but it stirred something deep within him. Aaron stood there, swaying on the sidewalk, his whole body screaming for the drugs he craved. But instead of turning away, he found himself walking through the doors. Inside, the warmth hit him first, the kind of warmth he hadn't felt in years. The congregation didn't stop their singing as he entered, but their eyes were on him. They didn't look at him with fear or judgment, but with something else, compassion. Aaron couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at him that way. At the front of the church stood a man, a pastor, who beckoned Aaron forward with a kind smile. Aaron stumbled down the aisle, unsure of why he was there, unsure of everything. But when the pastor began to speak, his words cut through the haze of Aaron's addiction, like a knife through fog.
I don't know where you've been, but I know that God sees you. He sees your pain, your struggles, your mistakes. And He's calling you home.
Home. That word hit Aaron like a sledgehammer. He hadn't felt at home anywhere in years, not even in his own skin. Tears he didn't know he had left began to flow down his face. The pastor spoke of forgiveness, of redemption, of a love so powerful that it could erase even the darkest of pasts. And for the first time in as long as Aaron could remember, he believed. In that moment, in that small church with the people who didn't even know his name, Aaron fell to his knees and prayed. He didn't know all the right words, but he knew he needed help. He asked Jesus to take the broken pieces of his life and make him whole again. From that night on, Aaron's life was never the same. It wasn't easy. Nothing about breaking free from addiction ever is. He relapsed, stumbled, and struggled. But every time he fell, the grace of God picked him back up. He started attending that little church regularly, not just for the sermons, but for the community he had found there. The people who had once been strangers became his family, guiding him as he fought to leave his old life behind. Day by day, Aaron let go of the drugs that had once ruled him. It was a slow process, and there were days when he thought he wouldn't make it. But with each prayer, each step closer to God, the weight on his soul began to lift. He started reading the Bible, finding solace in the words that spoke of love, grace, and a future he never thought possible. Years later, Aaron stood in front of a congregation, not as the broken young man he had once been, but as a testimony of God's power to transform lives. He had gone from being a prisoner to his addiction, to a man with a purpose, a man who had found freedom in the one thing that could truly fill the void in his heart, the love of Christ. And as he looked out at the faces before him, Aaron knew that his journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. Now he had the strength to walk in the light, knowing that no matter how far he had fallen, God had been there all along, waiting to pull him from the ashes into a new life of hope and peace.